Welcome back to another exciting web development project. We are building something really fun today. In this project, we will build a web application. This application will be an anime Pics generator. Here on the screen, you can see the final project in action. We have a prominent button right here. When you click the button, our application will call a special web service. This service provides a random anime image along with its title. Every time we click the Get Anime button, a loading effect appears first. After a moment, a brand new image loads onto the screen. This is a completely random picture along with the anime's title. You will learn how to work with an API for this project. We will fetch data from the API using a try and catch method for error handling. You will also learn to add a loading effect. This effect displays before the data appears in your browser. We will also explore how to create this entire user interface with CSS. You will learn to craft the beautiful background color and all the visual design elements. Let us start by setting up the project's foundation. We will begin with the HTML structure in the next section. I will meet you in the next section for the HTML setup. Alright everyone, let's get our project started now. I have placed the final version of our project right here. You can use it as a visual reference throughout our tutorial. You can see we have a container here. It contains a button and a title. The title says, Anime Pics Generator. When you click this button, it will fetch data from our API. This data includes an anime image and its corresponding title. Both the image and the name will then be displayed on the screen. Let us begin by creating the HTML structure for our project. This is the foundational part of our web page. I am opening Visual Studio Code for this project. You can use any text editor you prefer for following along. I will create a completely new project window. I am closing the current window we have open. I close the Get Started tab. Then I click on the File menu. From there, I select the Open Folder option. This allows us to create a new folder and then choose it for our project. I will create this new folder directly on my desktop. This makes it easy to find later. I am going to navigate to the desktop location. Then I will click on the New Folder button. This action will let me create a brand new folder. I name the folder for our project Anime Pics Generator. I press the Enter key to create it. I notice I missed the letter A in the word generator when naming the folder. Let me correct that spelling right now. Once we press the Enter key, the new folder will be created. With the folder created, we can now click on the Select Folder button. This action will choose our newly made project directory. This action will open our new folder right here in the editor. Inside the Explorer section on the left, we can begin adding our project files. We will place all our files into the folder we just created. Let's close that Get Started tab once more. On the left side, find the Explorer section. Click on the New File icon to create a file. We will name this file index.html. Press Enter to confirm the file name. The new file has been created and opens on the right side. The editor is completely empty right now. We can generate a starting template by simply typing an exclamation mark. When we click on the suggested boilerplate option, it automatically generates the foundational HTML structure for us. This structure includes the document type declaration at the top. This declaration specifies the type and version of HTML we are using for our page. For the HTML5 standard, we only need to write the word HTML. This simple declaration is all that is required. The HTML tag is the main container for everything on the page. This tag contains two essential sections, the head and the body. The head holds behind-the-scenes information for the browser. The body contains all the visible content that users will see. This lang attribute defines the language of the web page. It helps browsers and search engines understand the content's language. For our project, we have set the language to English. You can choose any language you want for your own website. Inside the head tag, we find several important elements. These include metadata tags for various purposes. We also have the title tag for the page. The first metadata tag defines our character set. This char set is set to UTF-8, which is the modern standard recommended by HTML5. This character set includes nearly every character and symbol you can imagine. It ensures users from all over the world can view our website correctly. Next, we have another important meta tag for compatibility. This tag specifically instructs Internet Explorer to use its most modern rendering engine. The engine it uses is called Edge. This specific compatibility tag exists for a reason. It ensures users on older Internet Explorer browsers get the best possible experience. Next, we have the viewport meta tag. This tag controls how your web page is displayed on different screen sizes. It ensures your content looks good on both mobile devices and desktop computers. This viewport tag controls how wide the content area appears on your screen. It ensures the content's width matches your device's screen width. For instance, the width of your content on a mobile device will be much smaller. This is a significant difference compared to viewing the site on a desktop or laptop computer. The initial scale sets the starting zoom level when the page first loads. We configure this value to be 1.0. This setting represents 100% of the original size. For example, if you set the initial scale to 0.8, that would be a zoom level of 80%. This means the page would appear slightly smaller when it first loads. Next up is the title tag. This displays the title text that appears in the browser's tab. You can see this title right now. Just open your web browser to check it. To help us see the changes in real time, I am using the Live Server extension. When you install this extension, you will notice a Go Live button appear at the very bottom of your screen. When you click this option, it will open the website in your default web browser. I am currently using Chrome as my main browser for this project. You can see the Browser tab currently displays the word Document. This matches the default title text we have in our HTML file. I will position the browser window on the right side of my screen. This allows us to watch our changes update in real time. Let's hide the Explorer panel on the left. We can do this by pressing Ctrl and B on the keyboard. This will give us more space for our code editor. This gives us much more room on the left side of the screen. Now we can see our code more clearly. Let's change the title of our web page next. We want it to display the name of our project. Currently, the title simply says Document. Let's update the title now. We need to change it from Documents to our project name. The new title should be Anime Pics Generators. We can see the Browser tab title has been updated. It now displays our project name. The Live Server extension automatically refreshes the browser view. It performs this update instantly every time you save your file within Visual Studio Code. Let us continue building our HTML structure. We will make our current file match the layout of the final version we saw earlier. Looking at our final version, you can see we have a main container element. This container holds all the different parts of our application together. Let me sketch this out visually for you. You will see the structure clearly. Let me walk you through the layout we are creating. We start with a main container. Inside this container, we have a title for our project. Next, we have a button for users to click. Finally, we have another separate container. This second container will hold the anime image and its name. We are adding this separate container for the anime details. We want this container to be hidden when the page first loads. It will only appear after the user clicks the button. When someone clicks the button, the anime information will appear. This container will then become visible on the screen. Next, we will need an image element. This element will display our anime pictures. Let me draw the structure for you using a different color. This will help us visualize the layout better. We also have an image element. Following that, we will display the anime's title. First, we need to establish this main container structure. We have a main container that holds all the elements on the page. Inside this main container, we have two main components. The first component is our title and button. The second component is another separate container. This inner container is designed to hold both the anime image and its name. Now that we understand the structure we are building, we can proceed with creating the HTML elements. For creating the main container element, we use a div tag. This div serves as our main structural container. The div element is essentially an empty container element by default. It does not have any inherent dimensions on its own. Next, we will place our main container inside the body section. We do this by adding a div element. We assign it a class called container. To create this container, we can simply type a dot followed by the word container. This uses a helpful shortcut feature. Now if we press the Enter key on our keyboard, it will automatically generate a div element for us. This div will have a class named container already applied to it. This shortcut is made possible by using an extension called emit. Next, we need to add an h3 tag for our main title. This title will display the text Anime Pics Generators at the top of our page. Let's copy this exact text from our reference image. We can paste it into our heading tag. Let's proceed with adding the button element next. We will use a simple button tag for this purpose. Now that we have added our heading tag, the title should appear on our website. You can see it says Anime Pics Generator. Now we will add a button element to our project. This button will be responsible for fetching data from the API. Let's create a button element for our project. This button will have a class name of btn. It will also have an ID with the same name, btn. To add a class, we use a dot symbol before the name. For adding an ID, we use a hashtag symbol instead. For the ID attribute, we use a hashtag symbol. This hashtag indicates that we are defining an ID selector. Now when we press the Enter key, we can see our new button appear. This button has both a class and an ID. The class is named btn, and the ID is also named btn. Inside the button element, we will add the text getAnime. This text will serve as the button's label for users. Let's check our browser window now. We should see the button with the text getAnime displayed on our web page. Next, we need to create a separate container. This container will hold both the anime image and the name of the character. Next, we create another container div. We will assign it a class name of AnimeContainer. Inside this container we just created, we will be placing an image tag. This image element will display the anime artwork we fetch from the API. For the image source, we do not have an alternative text that is acceptable for our current setup. For the image source, I will perform a quick search online for an anime image. I will choose any suitable result from that search. I will select an image from the internet for this demonstration. For instance, I can use this particular image you see here. Simply right-click on any anime image you find online and select Copy Image Address. Then paste that copied link directly into the source attribute of your image tag. You can now see the anime image appear on the web page. This gives us a visual reference for our project. I am adding this placeholder image for a specific reason. We will use it to style our layout in the next section. We need an image placeholder for our website styling. This placeholder helps us design the layout properly. In the next section, we will use JavaScript to fetch a random image from the API. This will replace our placeholder image with a new one each time. We do not require a permanent placeholder image in our code. The application will fetch images dynamically from the API. We will remove this placeholder image later. We will do this after we finish styling our project. Following the image, we have the name of the anime character or artist. Let's add another heading for the anime name. We will use an h3 tag for this element. This title was originally an h1 tag. We are changing it to an h3 tag instead. Let's change this heading to an h3 tag instead. This heading level will be more appropriate for our design. We do not need such a large heading for this title. A slightly smaller heading will work much better for our design. Next, we will add the name of the anime. We use an h3 tag for this. We also give it a class called AnimeName. We will write down anime name as a placeholder text for now. This will help us style the element properly. Adding a class to the image is important for our CSS styling. This element will also become dynamic later when we add JavaScript functionality. Next, we need to add a class to our image tag. We will call this class AnimeImage. That wraps up our image element setup perfectly. Our HTML structure is complete and looks correct. We have finished writing the markup for our project. In the next part of our tutorial, we will style the website. We will use CSS to transform our basic HTML structure. Our goal is to create a beautiful user interface for the project. You will see how we achieve the final look from our reference. We've just finished building the HTML structure for our project in the previous section. We put in the title and a button. We also added an image. Finally, we included an anime name tag. This name tag is just a simple heading element. Let us begin by creating our new CSS file. Inside Visual Studio Code, we need to open the File Explorer panel. You can do this by pressing the keyboard shortcut Ctrl-Shift-E. Let's create a new file for our styling. We will name this file style.css. Before we can see our styles take effect, we must connect our new CSS file to the HTML document. Let's go back into our index.html file. Find the title tag and place your cursor right after it. Now, type out the word link. You should see an autocomplete suggestion appear. Select the option that specifically mentions linking a CSS style sheet. Let's begin by styling the body section of our web page. As you can see, the body section has a beautiful background color. This color is actually a gradient that transitions smoothly. We call this effect a linear gradient. You will also notice all the content is perfectly centered on the page. To center everything perfectly, we will use Display Flex. This allows us to use Justify Content Center for horizontal alignment. We will also use Align Items Center for vertical alignment. Let's begin by targeting the body section. We do this by typing the word body. We then open a set of curly braces to contain our styles. The first step involves removing any default spacing. We will set the margin to 0. This eliminates any unwanted space between our content and the browser's edges. Let's change the background color of our page. We set the background property next. We want that gradient color we discussed earlier. It begins with a blue shade on the left. The color then transitions smoothly to yellow on the right. To create that gradient background, we need to use the linear gradient function. This gradient moves from left to right. You write the direction as to right inside the function. After the direction, you add a comma. The first color you specify is light blue. After another comma, the second color you define is yellow. Notice how the background shifts from a light blue on the left. It transitions smoothly across the screen until it becomes a vibrant yellow on the right. Now we will use Flexbox for the layout. This display property allows us to bring all the elements to the center of the page. We change the display property from block to flex. We also need to define a height for the body. Without a set height, we cannot center the elements vertically. We must give the body a height of 100% to achieve this vertical centering. We set the height to 100% of the viewport height. This ensures the height always fills the entire screen. The layout remains consistent regardless of your zoom level. To center everything horizontally, we use Justify Content Center. This pulls all the elements to the middle of the screen from left to right. Then, to center everything vertically, we use Align Items Center. This moves all the content to the middle from top to bottom. Currently, the image is very large, making it difficult to see the centering effect. Once we reduce the image size, you will clearly see that everything becomes perfectly centered both vertically and horizontally. You might remember earlier we gave the image a specific class name. That class name is Anime Image. We will target the Anime Image class using .AnimeImage. Let us make the image smaller by adjusting its dimensions. We will change the height to 300 pixels. We will also set the width to 300 pixels. Now we have successfully centered everything on the page. You can see all the elements are aligned both horizontally and vertically. Let's change the font family for the text. I will set it to Courier New, which is a common monospace font. Now let's style the container element. We want to give it a clean and polished appearance. The viewers can see a white container on the screen. This container has a white background color. Our goal is to create this container element. Next, we will style the main container for our content. This container is a division element with the class of container. It wraps around all the other elements on our page. We will now target the container class in our CSS. We do this by typing .container. We want to give the container a white background color. However, a pure white can be a bit harsh on the eyes. I'm using a color called Alice Blue for the background. This color is a very light shade of white. It is not a pure, stark white color. This softer tone is much easier on the eyes. Next, we will add a border radius to the container. This will give it nicely rounded corners with a radius of 10 pixels. This property creates a nice, rounded corner effect on our container. Let's also apply a box shadow to give it some depth. We definitely want to add a box shadow to this container. It gives the design a nice sense of depth. This shadow effect makes the container appear to lift off the page. The box shadow property requires several values to define its appearance. We set the horizontal offset to 0. This means the shadow won't extend to the left or the right side. We then set the vertical offset to 10 pixels. This creates a shadow that appears directly below the container. You can now observe a shadow appearing at the bottom. This shadow extends about 10 pixels downward. It also has a blur effect of 20 pixels for a softer look. You can see the shadow now appears on the left and right sides as well. This effect is created by the blur property of the box shadow. The shadow appears quite dark at the moment. We should adjust it to be a bit lighter. We select a black color using RGBA values. We set the red, green, and blue channels all to 0. For the transparency, we use a value of 0.3. This creates a shadow that is only 30% opaque. This creates a shadow with 30% transparency. It makes the shadow appear softer and more subtle. You can see the shadow looks much better now. It has a nice soft effect with that transparency. To center all the text within the container, we can apply Text Align Center. This moves all the text to the middle. Next, we should add some internal spacing. This creates space between the container's border and the elements inside it. We are adding some internal spacing with a padding of 10 pixels. This creates comfortable breathing room between the container's edge and the content inside. Next, we will define the container's width. We will set this width to 450 pixels for a consistent look. Setting the width to 450 pixels gives us a nice container size for most desktop views. This fixed width remains consistent even on larger screens. Let's check how the container looks on mobile devices. Open the developer tools by pressing Ctrl-Shift-C, then select the mobile view option. You can see on a mobile screen the container touches the edges of the viewport. To prevent this from happening, we can add a small margin around the container. A margin of 5 pixels will create a comfortable space. This margin creates a nice breathing room around the container. It ensures the container does not touch the edges of the screen. This adjustment ensures our container looks great on mobile devices. It prevents the layout from touching the screen edges on smaller screens. Let us move our view back to the main editor panel. We will continue our work from there. We have finished styling the main container for our project. It now has a nice background color and a subtle shadow effect. Let's move on to styling the button next. Next, we need to style our button element. We can specifically target the button using its class selector. Our button has a class applied to it. This class is named btn. To target our button in the style sheet, we use its class name with a dot. We will target the button by using its class name. Then we open a set of curly braces to begin writing our styles. Let us give our button a nice green background color. This will make it stand out visually on the page. We want to change the text color of the button to a light blue shade. This will make the writing on the button easier to read. This button is looking a little small right now. We can make it larger by adding some padding around the text. We will add some padding to create space around the button text. We will add 10 pixels of padding on the top and bottom. For the left and right sides, we will add 30 pixels of padding. We should also increase the font size for better readability. Let's set the text to 16 pixels. Let's create some breathing room between the button and the image. We can add a margin to the bottom of the button to push it away from the picture. Let's add some space below the button. We can do this by setting a bottom margin of 30 pixels. Let's give this button some rounded corners by adding a border radius. This will soften the edges and make it look more modern. Next, we set the border radius to 6 pixels to create rounded corners. Then, we want to change the mouse cursor when hovering over the button. We set the cursor property to pointer to indicate it is clickable. This change ensures the cursor becomes a pointing hand when you move your mouse over the button. You will see the cursor's appearance change from a standard arrow to a hand icon. The The cursor changes from a regular arrow to a pointing hand icon. This visual feedback indicates the button is interactive. We have successfully styled the button with all its visual properties. The button's interactive states are now fully defined. Now let's talk about styling the button for its disabled state. When you look at the final project version, you will notice something important. After clicking the button to make a request, it turns gray and becomes disabled. This prevents users from making multiple requests while an image is still loading. You can observe this behavior in the final version. The button becomes gray and disabled until the new image has finished loading. We need to create a specific style for when the button is disabled. This will help users understand the button's state visually. Next, we will style the button for its disabled state. We can target the disabled button directly in our CSS. When the button is disabled, we want to change its background color to gray. We also want to change the mouse cursor. Instead of the pointing hand, we want to show the Not Allowed symbol. Right now, you see the button in its normal enabled state. You could go into the index.html file and manually add the disabled attribute to the button tag. This would let you see how our new disabled styles look. Notice how the button has turned gray. This change indicates it is disabled. The cursor now shows a Not Allowed symbol to confirm you cannot click it. Let's go ahead and remove the disabled attribute from the button for now. We will be adding this disabled state back later using JavaScript to control the button's functionality. For the time being, we will leave the button in its default enabled state. We have finished styling the button with all its visual properties. The button now has a complete appearance and interactive states. Now let's move on to styling the image element. We want to make some visual changes to our image. We have already set the image height and width in our previous styling step. Next, let's make the image perfectly circular. We can achieve this by setting the border radius to 50%. This will curve all the corners completely. This will make the image perfectly rounded. I also want to add a border around the image to give it a nice frame. We will add a border around the image. We set the border width to 3 pixels. We want the border to be a solid line. You can see the solid border appearing clearly now. Right now, we see a black border around the image. Let's change that border color to green instead. That border looks much better in green now. Next, we will focus on styling the anime name tag. We want to make it visually distinct and appealing. Let's recall the class we assigned to the anime name. We used the class anime name. I will copy this class name from the HTML file. Then I will add a dot before it in the CSS file. Finally, I will paste it into the selector to target and style it. We can now target this element specifically in our CSS file. We begin by applying a margin property to create some space around it. We add a margin of 20 pixels around this element. This creates some nice breathing room between the different parts. I want this element to have a background color. It should be the same green color as the button we just styled. Let's set the background color to green for this element. This will make it visually consistent with the button style. Next, we will change the text color to Alice Blue for better readability. We will also add some padding to create space around the text. Initially, we might try 20 pixels of padding. After reviewing, we can adjust that down to 10 pixels for a more balanced look. We will now add a border radius to this element. This will give it nicely rounded corners with a 6-pixel curve. We should increase the text size to 17 pixels for better readability. We have actually made it a bit smaller than before. Next, we will add a font weight of 600 to make the text bolder. This styling gives us a clean and polished look for the text. The font weight makes it appear bold and prominent. The styling is looking really good at this point. We have achieved the visual design we wanted for our project. Next, I want to hide this entire section for now. In the final version of our project, when a user first visits the page, the image and the name will not be visible. These elements will only appear after the button is clicked for the first time. We want to hide that anime container for the moment. We can achieve this by targeting that specific container in our styles. We will target the container with the class name AnimeContainer. Then we will set its display property to none for now. This will completely hide that section from view. This CSS rule will hide the container for now. Later, we will use JavaScript to display the anime container. It will appear dynamically when a user clicks the Get Anime button for the first time. We have now completed all the styling for our project using CSS. The visual design is fully implemented and ready for the next step. Now we will bring our project to life by adding dynamic functionality. We will accomplish this by using JavaScript in our next section. So see the next section for the JavaScript part of the project. We have now finished the CSS portion of our project. We completed the styling work in the previous section. In this section, we will create a new JavaScript file for our project. This step will add more functionality to our application. Looking at the final project, you can see what we are building. When you click the Get Anime button, it fetches data from an API. This process retrieves a new image and a corresponding character name for you. Sometimes, the API does not have the artist name available. In those cases, you will see the word unknown displayed instead. When you click the button, you will notice a loading indicator appears. The text in the name section will change to say updating. The image area will also display a loading animation while it fetches the data. We need to obtain the API endpoint for our project. This API will provide the data we require. Now, let's get into the actual JavaScript functionality. We need to manipulate several elements on the page. We are going to work with 4 specific elements on the page. We need to manipulate these elements using our JavaScript code. First, we have this button element that we need to target. We also need to update the source of the image element. Additionally, we must change the text content for the name. Finally, we need to manage the display property of the main container. Right now, the container is not visible at all because its display property is set to none. Once we have successfully fetched the information from the API, we want to change the display property of this container. We need to make it visible on the page. We want to change the display property for this container. We need to make it visible when we have the information. Let me correct that. This container currently has its display set to none. This container is currently set to display blah. This means it is visible on the page. We need to toggle the display property of our container. Sometimes we need to show it as block. Other times we need to hide it by setting it to none. We will switch between these two states based on whether we have data. Our first step involves creating the JavaScript file for this project. This is a necessary action to proceed with the coding. Let us open the Explorer section by pressing the keyboard shortcut, Ctrl, Shift, and E. We will create a new file in the Explorer section. We will place this new file on the left side panel. We will name this new file index.js. Just like we did with the CSS file, we must also link our new JavaScript file. This link needs to be placed within the HTML document's code. This connection allows our web page to use the JavaScript we write. Let's close the Explorer panel now. We can do this by pressing the Ctrl and B keys together. To connect our JavaScript file, we must place the script link right before the closing body tag. This positioning ensures that all the HTML elements are fully loaded before the browser begins reading and executing our JavaScript code. To add the JavaScript file to our web page, we will use a script tag. We specifically need the script tag option that includes the source attribute. This source attribute is what points to our JavaScript file. The src attribute specifies the destination file we want to load. Since our index.js file is in the same folder as our HTML file, we simply write its name here. We have successfully linked our JavaScript file to the HTML document. This means we can now start writing and using JavaScript code in our project. We need to bring 4 different elements into our JavaScript code. These are the specific parts of our web page we want to control and update with our script. The first element we need to select is the button. We can see the button has an ID attribute. This ID is set to btn. Next, we need to get the image element. We also need to get the h3 tag for the character name. Finally, we need to target the entire anime container as well. For the button element, we create a constant called btn element. We use document.getElementById to search the document. We target the button by its ID, which is btn. This method allows us to get a reference to the button. We store that reference in our btn element variable. We use the getElementById method for a specific reason. This approach works because our button has an ID attribute. That ID is called btn. We can specifically target that button element by using the getElementById method. This method searches through the document for an element with the exact ID we provide. we have successfully retrieved the button element. It is now stored in our JavaScript variable. The next element we need to access is the main container for our anime content. We can target this container using its specific class name. I have copied this class name. Remember, this is a class selector, not an ID. First, we write down the name of the constant for the container element. We can call it anime container element. This constant will be equal to document.querySelector. We use querySelector because this element uses a class, not an ID. Since we are targeting a class, we need to add a dot before pasting the class name. We will use a dot before the class name anime container because we are targeting a class. This line of code will successfully grab that specific element from the page. It then stores that element inside our variable for later use. Next, we need to select the image element for our project. We can create a constant variable called AnimeImageElement. We assign this variable by using document.querySelector. Since we are targeting a class, we need to use a dot before the class name. The class we are looking for is called anime-img. The final element we need to select is the character name. We will target the element with the class anime name. I will now copy the class name for the anime name element. We create another constant variable for this element. Let us call this variable anime name element. This variable will be equal to document.querySelector. Since we are targeting a class, we add a dot before the class name. We type .anime-name to select the correct element. The first element we selected was the button. Since we were targeting an ID attribute, we used the getElementById method. This specific method does not require a dot or a hashtag symbol before the ID name. We did not add a dot for the ID or a hashtag for the class. We have successfully obtained all four of these essential elements. Each element is now stored within its own JavaScript variable. Now we need to add an event listener to this button element. This will allow us to respond when a user clicks on it. This function will fetch data from the API. It works just like the final version of our project. When we click the button, it activates a specific function. This function's job is to retrieve data from the API. It will then fetch the information we need for our project. We will now add an event listener to our button element. We accomplish this by using the addEventListener method. We are going to add an event listener to this button for the click event. This listener will trigger a specific function whenever the button is clicked. We will create a function for this event listener. This function will handle fetching our data from the API. Now, we are going to write the entire function from scratch. This function will call the API to fetch our data. It will retrieve the information we need for our project. Now, I want to show you the specific API we will be using for this project. Let's open up a web browser and search on Google. We will need to visit a specific website for our API. We need to search for a website called Catboys. Let's take a look at the Catboys API website. We are going to use an API called the Catboys API. To find the API documentation, search for Catboys API on Google. You will see a result for catboys.com. This website has a dedicated API section at catboys.com/API. Clicking on this link will take you to their API documentation page. This page displays all the different API endpoints they offer. For instance, we can use the Catboys API to get a random image. The base URL for this is api.catboys.com. We simply need to add a / and the word image to that address. This specific API endpoint will return a random image for our project. The API provides more than just an image. It also gives us the image URL and the artist name. Let me test this API directly in the browser to show you how it works. You can test this API directly in your own browser by clicking the Try It Now button. This will show you exactly how the API works. Notice how every time you refresh this page, you get a completely new image along with a different artist name. We want to use this URL for the image. We also want to use the artist name from the data. The URL we receive points directly to an image file. The artist field provides the name of that specific character. The great news about this website is that you do not need an API key. You also do not need any other special setup or authentication. We have learned about the API we will be using. Let us return to our code editor to continue building the project. To retrieve data from the API, we will use a JavaScript method called fetch. This fetch method is how we make a request to get the information we need. There is always a chance that the API might return an error. We need to be prepared to catch that error if it happens. JavaScript provides a powerful way to handle potential errors. We can use a specific method for this called try and catch. When you start typing the word try, you will see a suggestion appear. This suggestion is for the try-catch statement. If you select that option, you will see the code structure for a try and catch block. This structure helps you handle any potential errors gracefully. This structure helps us manage potential errors gracefully. We can catch any issues that occur during the API request. When we fetch data from an API, an error can occur. We use a try and catch block to handle this situation. This allows us to intercept the error and understand what went wrong. To get the data we need, we will create a constant called response. This response will be the result of fetching information from our chosen API. Let's look at the website for the API, which is catboys.com. The base URL we will use is api.catboys.com. We can copy the API base URL from the documentation. Then we paste it into our code. Adding a / and the word imgs to the end will give us the image endpoint. We will specify the endpoint as imgs to fetch an image. Let us continue with our code now. We need to transform that response into a JSON format. This conversion allows us to work with the data easily. Let us examine the final version again. When we click the button, we see a loading effect while waiting for the data. We need a way to show the user that we are waiting for the API to send back the data. This is where we can implement a loading indicator. We can achieve this by adding a loading effect while we wait for the response. We need to add an await keyword before fetching the data. This will pause the code execution until the data is received. Now let's write the word await. This keyword is very important for handling the API request. The await keyword will pause the code execution. It waits for the fetch operation to fully complete before moving on to the next line. To use the await keyword effectively, you need to make your function asynchronous. This is a specific rule in JavaScript you must follow. When you use the await keyword in your code, you must also declare your function as asynchronous. This is a fundamental rule of JavaScript that ensures your code waits properly for operations to complete. This function needs to be asynchronous because it contains an operation that requires waiting. We must pause the code execution until that specific operation completes successfully. This function now needs to be asynchronous because it contains an await keyword. The await keyword will pause the execution of the function on that specific line. It waits for the fetch operation to complete before moving on to the next line of code. We must wait for the API to respond with the data. This waiting ensures the image and name are ready before we display them. We also need to wait for the response to be converted into a JSON file. This conversion step is crucial for working with the data in our JavaScript code. Now that we have made the request and converted the response, we can access the data object. This data object contains the information we need from the API. Now I will create a constant variable to store the data. We will wait for the response from the fetch request. Then we convert that response into a JSON format. We do this by using the .json method. To convert the response data into a format we can use, we need to parse it as JSON. We do this by using the JSON method on the response object. This step is essential for accessing the data we receive from the API. This data is now ready for us to use. We can work with the information we received from the API. Let's test our code by logging the data to the console. Open your browser's developer tools by pressing the F12 key. Let's open up the browser's developer console now. We can do this by pressing the F12 key. Let's click on the Get Anime button now. We can see in the console that we have successfully received the data from the API. Let's check what we have by using console.log to see the data. We have successfully received the data from the API. The information is now available for us to use. This data provides us with the URL for the image we need. You can copy this URL and paste it into your browser's address bar. you will see that it leads to an image. Perfect, we have successfully received the data from the API. We can see the artist name for this image is listed as unknown. This happens when the API does not have the specific name available. The API provides us with the image URL and the artist's name. These two pieces of information are what we need to use. We will use the URL for the image and the artist's name. Every time you click the button, it fetches a completely new and random image. If we paste the image URL now, it will show a different picture. This happens because the API provides a new random image each time we make a request. That fetch worked perfectly and returned the data we needed. We have successfully retrieved the data from the API. All the information we need is now stored inside this data variable. First, we need to change the container's display so it becomes visible. We need to make that container visible now. We will change its display property to block. This will make the container appear on the page. Let us now delete this console log statement. We do not need it anymore. We have successfully retrieved the data from the API. Now we can use this data to update our page elements. For example, we can update the anime image and name. The first thing we need to do is target the anime container element. We will change its display style property. We will now change the display style for the anime container. We need to set its display property to block. We are going to access the style property of the container element. Then, we will change its display property. We will update the container's display property. It will change from none to block. This makes the container visible on the page. Each time we click the Get Anime button, we will see the container appear. This happens because we wait for the API response to complete. Then we change the container's display from none to block. That change makes the container visible so we can see our results. Next, we need to update the displayed image. We will change the source of this image. The new image will come from the API data. Our goal is to change this displayed image. We want to set it to the new image we are getting from the API. This image information is located inside the data object we received. Next, we will update the source of our anime image element. We will set it to use the URL we received from the data. Each time you click the button, you receive a different image. Currently, we do not have a loading effect in place for these changes. Some images will load almost instantly on a fast connection. Others might take a little longer depending on your internet speed. The speed of loading varies significantly. It depends entirely on how fast your internet connection is at that moment. Now we can update the anime name element as well. Changing the anime name element is straightforward. We simply need to update its text content. We need to set the inner text of this element to the artist name we received from the API. We will now update the anime name element. We want to set its inner text to the artist name from our data object. This time, the name is unknown. The previous name was also unknown. However, these are actually two different characters. Each time we click the button, we receive a different character from the API. The name displayed will vary depending on which character is returned. We have successfully completed that functionality. The button now fetches and displays new data correctly. We can also catch any errors that might occur during the fetch process. We will use console.log to display the error details in the browser's console. This helps us understand what went wrong. In the final version of our project, we want to disable the button immediately after a click. This prevents the user from making multiple requests while waiting for the image to load. This prevents too many requests from being sent at once. We replace the image with a loading spinner. We also change the name text to say updating. This happens while we wait for the data to arrive. This is where we see the waiting indicator appear. It shows that our request is currently being processed. Before we start fetching the data, we can update the button's state. We should disable the button to prevent multiple clicks. We select the button element and modify its disabled property. We set this property to true to disable the button. We are going to disable the button by changing its disabled property to true. That makes sense because now when we click the button, it becomes disabled and cannot be clicked again. Let's test this by clicking the button now. You can see the button becomes disabled after we click it. The button is currently disabled. We want to re-enable it once the data fetching is complete. We can do this by setting the disabled property back to false. When we click the button, it becomes disabled immediately. This prevents multiple requests from being sent. Once the image and text data have loaded successfully, the button becomes enabled again. We will change the button's disabled state to true. We also want to update the text inside the button. We can set its inner text to show the word loading with 3 dots. When we click the button, we can see the loading text appear. This shows us that the request is in progress. The button now displays the loading text, but we must restore its original state afterward. We need to change it back to display the getAnime text. After we finish fetching the data, we change the button text back to getAnimes. This returns the button to its original state. When we click the button, it shows loading text. After the data is fetched successfully, the text changes back to getAnime. This ensures the user knows when the request is complete. When we click the button, you will see the loading text appear. After the data is successfully fetched, it will change back to the original text. I believe the concept is clear to you now. When we click the button, it shows a loading message. After the data is successfully fetched from the API, the button text changes back to getAnimes. You should now understand how this process works. We are setting up the loading state before making the API request. Then we wait for the data to arrive and update the interface accordingly. You should now understand the basic concept of how this loading functionality works. We have 2 await statements in our code. These await statements are very important for our loading functionality. They ensure our code waits for the API response before continuing. This is how we create the smooth loading effect. Before we make the API request, we add the loading indicators. After the data is received, we revert everything back to its normal state. That covers the basic structure of our loading effect. Let's apply the same loading effect to the image and the name elements as well. Let's handle the anime name element next. We want to update its text content. For the anime name element, we want to change its inner text. We will set it to say updating while we are waiting for the API response. You can see the name currently says unknown. This will change to updating when we are waiting for the API response. Let's focus on this specific part of the process. When we click the button, the text will change to say updating. This message will stay on the screen while we wait for the data to arrive. Now we need to implement a loading animation. This visual indicator will show users that the request is being processed. Let's find a loading spinner for our project. We can get one from a website called Loading.io. To find a loading spinner for your project, you can search for a website called Loading.io. This website offers a wide variety of free loading animations for you to use. Many of the loading icons are available for free. Some premium options do require payment. You can search through the available loading effects on their website. You can find many different icons and loading animations on this website. Most of them are available completely for free. I want to show you a specific loading animation for our example. The one I want to use is this circular spinner you see here. Let's choose this frozen color spinner for our loading effect. We will make the spinner appear smaller on the screen. We should also reduce its thickness a bit as well. I want the background to be completely transparent. Everything else about this loading spinner looks perfect. I will download the SVG file for this loading animation. This will give us a vector graphic that loads quickly. This website is completely free for you to use. You can download the loading animations without any cost. You can click on the SVG option first. Then you need to select the animate feature. This action will download the animated version for you. You will see a free download option appear. Simply click on the download button to get the file. The file has downloaded successfully and is now ready for use. I have downloaded the spinner file successfully. The file is now ready for use in our project. I will drag the downloaded file directly into the editor. You should open the Explorer panel to see the file. Then we can paste the file's content right into our project directory. The spinner file has been successfully added to our project directory. This is just the code itself. That is why it loads so quickly. The great thing about SVG code is that it loads incredibly fast. SVG files offer excellent benefits for your website. They load incredibly fast for your users. This speed advantage makes them a great choice for loading animations. Next, we should give this file a more descriptive name. Let's rename the file to spinner.svg. Let's close the Explorer section now to keep our workspace tidy. we are going to set the source for our image element. We will set it to the URL we received from the data. While the data is loading, we temporarily show the spinner image instead of the final anime picture. This loading image appears in place of the actual data URL we are fetching. We will set the source to our spinner.svg file. This displays our loading animation while we wait for the API response. Let's test our website now. Each time you click the Get Anime button, you will see the loading spinner appear. The actual image will then load and display once the data has been fetched. Let's take a look at our project now and see how the loading effect works when we click the button. This is the standard approach developers use for loading effects. It creates a smooth user experience while data is being fetched. This approach uses the await keyword to pause the code execution. The program waits until the API response arrives before it continues. If you skip using the await keyword, the code will immediately send the request. It will then proceed directly to the next line of code without waiting for a response. Without the await keyword, the code would continue running immediately. It would not pause to display the loading effect. To properly handle this asynchronous operation, you must use the await keyword. You also need to declare the containing function as asynchronous. Before you send the request to the API, you should activate your loading effect. After the data has been successfully fetched, you will then take that information and display it on the page. We need to handle any errors that might occur during the fetch process. When an error happens, we should reset our interface back to its normal state. This ensures the user can try again without any issues. For instance, we will also change the button text back to its original state. We will update the anime name to display an error message. It will say an error occurred, and to please try again. Let me demonstrate what happens when an error occurs during the fetch request. Let us open the Web Developer Tools by pressing Ctrl-Shift-C. Then, we will navigate to the Network tab. Let's make our first request to the API now and see what happens. Let's open the Network tab in our Developer Tools. We can simulate a slow connection for testing purposes. You can even go completely offline to see how errors are handled. To demonstrate how error handling works, try switching to offline mode in your network settings. Then click the button to make a request. You will receive an error message because the browser cannot fetch data from the API without an internet connection. Look at the screen now. You can see an error message displayed. It says an error happened and asks you to try again. The button also returns to its original state. It now displays the text, "Get Anime" once more. This allows you to try the request again if needed. If an error happens, you can try again. Each time you get an error, the button will reset so you can make another attempt. Once you are connected to the internet again, you can make a new request and successfully retrieve an image. When an error occurs within your website, the try-catch block effectively captures that error. This allows you to display a helpful error message directly to your user. Your website can now effectively catch and display any errors that occur. This was the final step for our project. That brings us to the end of this project. I truly hope you enjoyed following along and learned some valuable new skills. This brings us to the conclusion of our website project. We have successfully implemented all the core features. We have successfully completed all the functionality for our website project. You have learned how to fetch data and handle loading states. This project covered many important JavaScript concepts. We learned how to fetch data from an API and use try-catch for error handling. We also implemented loading effects to improve the user experience. Finally, we dynamically changed the styles on the page using JavaScript. I hope you found this project enjoyable and educational. You have learned several important JavaScript concepts through practical application. I look forward to seeing you in our next tutorial.